So I'd like to start off also by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on, the Whadjuk Noongar people. And I wish to acknowledge and respect the continuing culture and contribution they make to this city and region. And also I'd like to pay respects to those of the land that people are going to be listening to this presentation on once we put it online. So thank you very much. So tonight's speaker is Stewart Jones, and he's going to be talking on laboratory capacity building in Asia Pacific region.
Thanks everybody for coming tonight. My name is Stewart Jones, and over the last 25 years I've managed several international projects and consultancies for the Australian Government and the World Health Organisation. I'm fortunate to be the current coordinator of the Asia Pacific Food Analysis Network. Well, we seem to have been hearing a lot about the Pacific region in the last few months, particularly in the light of the security deal between China and the Solomon Islands. All of a sudden, it seems Australia has become more aware of its neighbours. But this focus on our neighbours is really nothing new. Prime Minister Paul Keating said over 30 years ago that if we do not succeed in the Asia Pacific, we succeed nowhere. He went on to say that our engagement with the region has to be uncompromising, unfailing and tenacious. But it wasn't only Prime Ministers realising the importance of the Asia-Pacific region 30 years ago. APFAN, the Asia Pacific Food Analysis Network, was established in Brisbane in 1989 as a special project of the Federation of Asian Chemical Societies, or FACS. Australian National University Emeritus Fellow Dr. Howard Bradbury was APFAN's founding coordinator. The key to APFAN's success has been its simplicity of approach, and Dr. Bradbury developed simple testing kits that helped to reduce Konzo disease, a permanent paralysis of the legs caused by cyanogens in cassava, a staple food for around 600 million people. Dr. Bradbury was made a member of the Order of Australia in 2007 in recognition of his humanitarian work, and he passed away in 2016. Over the last 33 years, APFAN has been involved in laboratory capacity building activities such as conferences on food analysis, analytical workshops, and short courses and special projects. As a result of these activities, several thousand food analysts have been trained, have had the opportunity to travel throughout the Asia-Pacific region, and have become quality drivers within their own laboratories and countries. So that is what we will be talking about tonight, is an outline of some of the work that APFAN has been doing to improve the performance of food laboratories in the region. Now, a globalised food supply requires reliable food analysis laboratories to assist with both food safety and food trade. It has been estimated that over 9,000 people in the Asia-Pacific region die each year from food poisoning. A novel approach to food safety is required given the warm, humid climate and a lack of adequate refrigeration and potable water. A regional approach to food trade is required since the region is an important economic trading bloc recognised by the formation of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2007. There were other moves afoot 30 years ago as well. The International Standards Organisation and the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation developed a statement on the essential technical requirements for testing laboratories, which was released in 1990 as the ISO IEC Guide 25, the first time that an international approach to laboratory technical requirements was made. This ISO Guide 25 provided definitions for a reference material, which is really an independent material a laboratory uses to ensure its calibration and analysis measurements are correct, and for a certified reference material whose value is traceable. And by traceable, we mean back to the SI or international system of units, including the second, the kilogram, the metre, the mole and the ampere. The guide emphasised that all significant equipment shall be calibrated, and it also provided a definition for proficiency testing. It was recognised that there was a need to align this Guide 25 more closely with the ISO 9001 Quality Systems Standard. The revision of the ISO 9001 standard in 1994 prompted a revision of the Guide 25 to become the 17025 International Standard in 1999. This new standard now contained both management and technical requirements. The release of ISO 9001 in 2000 led to the revision of the 17025 standard in 2005, which was now called a management system and not a quality system. So most of the changes were in the management requirements, with just small changes to the technical requirements here. But this 2005 revision did emphasise the need for laboratories to monitor their daily performance by analysing their quality control data, and here we get into the use of control charts. Perhaps more importantly, it began to emphasise the broad role of reference materials in support of laboratory quality. In fact, we now know that reference materials can have a wide variety of uses. Regional laboratories need to access reasonably priced reference materials, and APFAN recognised the growing awareness of the production and use of reference materials and took part in a project sponsored by AusAid, the Australian Aid Agency, entitled Development of Food Reference Materials Networks in the Australasian Region. Especially with food, that is usually marketed to consumers in small packets that are labelled with a batch number and a use-by date, we thought we could just trial the retail purchase of multiple packets already prepared and just needing to be distributed to the participants. So, packets of goldfish food and ginseng cereal were purchased locally and distributed free of charge to participants at a workshop in Bandung in Indonesia. Homogeneity and stability testing were performed by the National Measurement Institute in Australia. The homogeneity testing for the ginseng cereal showed approximately 3 times the variability of that seen for the goldfish food. That is, the goldfish food was more homogeneous than the ginseng cereal. We concluded that materials such as the goldfish food could be used as the basis for a reliable reference material into the future. A third material was trialled at a follow-up international workshop in Bangkok in Thailand. This time, commercially available fish meal product was distributed free of charge to participants, and results received back from 77 regional laboratories. It was found that this fish meal material was sufficiently homogeneous for all of the analytes. This enabled us to isolate any variability to the laboratories themselves and their analytical methods. For example, while most participants used a hot air oven for moisture, the oven temperatures employed formed 2 principal groups: those who dried at around 105 degrees and those who dried at around 130 degrees. Results from the latter group formed the majority of those reporting moisture values above the median. To me, this is quite concerning if we can't even get agreement across the region on what oven temperature to use for moisture analysis. Another example is that for total nitrogen, where many laboratories reported protein content rather than nitrogen content, and this was easily detected as a result that is 6 times higher than expected, a simple reporting error. In summary, the results from these trials show that it is possible to produce inexpensive reference materials that can significantly help laboratories in the Asia-Pacific region to assess their performance compared to their peers. However, it was recognised that training should be provided on the steps involved in reference material production in order for the laboratories to achieve self-sufficiency. And so, a practical session was held where 4 candidate reference materials were produced in a single day. The participants were divided into 4 groups that produced candidate materials for nutrients, for microbiological contaminants, for pesticide residues and for metals in water. The groups attempted as best they could to follow the ISO Guide 34, which is now the ISO 17034 standard for general requirements for the competence of reference material producers. For the metals in water group, river water was chosen as the matrix since it was cheap, readily available and reflected a real environmental sample. The water was acidified to pH 1 to 2 for stability and the samples spiked with heavy metals. We can see the true value from the nominal spiking concentration, the NMI results, and the consensus median from the participants. We're all in good agreement. This enabled the assigning of provisional reference values for the metals with a reasonable degree of confidence. This exercise proved to be a valuable practical learning experience for all participants on the international requirements for reference material producers. After 2005, we then saw the ISO 9001 standard revised in 2008 and 2015. The latest version of 17025 was then released in 2017, with significant changes to the management requirements, again, this time to become performance-based in terms of risk and opportunity. Having said that, the technical side of things has also been strengthened with specific requirements for calibration and an entire annex on establishing and demonstrating metrological traceability. Furthermore, the standard states that the laboratory shall monitor its performance through participation in proficiency testing and/or inter-laboratory comparisons. It is obvious that there are similarities in the functions of reference materials and proficiency testing, since the proficiency testing materials can be used as reference materials and reference materials can be used in proficiency testing studies. So, following the new 2017 standard, we developed the next APFAN project to socialise the conduct of proficiency testing studies and especially the statistical treatment of their results. A multi-phase project commenced in 2017. To date, 3 proficiency testing studies have been conducted, with follow-up workshops in Indonesia and in Thailand. The COVID pandemic put a stop to the Philippine workshop in 2020, but we hope that we can get back on track again in the next year. The first PT study was conducted on samples of rice flour and fish meal, with materials being given free of charge to all 91 participants. The results were statistically assessed to ISO 13528, which is Statistical Methods for Use in Proficiency Testing by Interlaboratory Comparison standard, enabling us to monitor the uncertainty of the reported results. Again, we find differences in the methodologies used for moisture with drying at 105 and 130 degrees. The second PT trial consisted of samples of natural and spiked rice flour, fish meal and defatted soybean flour. The test materials were provided free of charge to 99 participants. Results again were statistically assessed to ISO 13528, and these more powerful statistics enable us to drill down into the different methodologies, even to the degree of showing the effect on the results of sample pre-treatment, here for mercury and fish meal, comparing dry ashing to acid digestion to microwave digestion. Or here, this time grouping the mercury results according to the type of instrument used. For example, AAS, cold vapour AAS, ICP-MS, mercury analyzer, and even NAA, or neutron activation analysis. Similar treatments were prepared for total lipids based on whether or not a hydrolysis step was included, and for ash based on whether or not a pre-charring step was included. The PT3 proficiency testing round was conducted by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute in the Philippines on the analysis of proximates, minerals and total dietary fibre in fortified rice mung bean blend. Again, the statistical treatment of the data allowed us to see the effects that differences in the methodologies could have on the final measured result. For example, we could see the spread of results for ash depending on whether the sample is ashed at 525, 550 or 600 degrees, and we could see the effects of different drying temperatures for moisture and whether or not a hydrolysis step was included for fat, and even the optimisation of the enzyme to substrate ratio for total dietary fibre. All of these potential causes of variation can be considered during a review of the methods used to make sure we all use methods that have the best accuracy and precision. And that is what we are currently doing. The ASEAN Foods Manual of Nutrient Methods that was developed in 2011 is being reviewed in the light of the new 17025 standard requirements and also using the results from the statistics from the PT studies. And I'm happy to announce that the PT4 exercise in the Philippines will go ahead next year, and the first planning meeting will be held this week. Then the aim is to take these workshops into Malaysia and then into developing countries such as Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar and Bangladesh, or even into the Pacific. We also continue to work for the Pacific Quality Infrastructure, or PQI project, under the direction of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and Dr. Ulrich Diekmann, which seeks to improve standards setting, metrology and trade measurement, and analytical testing in the Pacific. All of these activities, I hope, will have the goal of bringing the Asia and the Pacific regions together in a way they have never done before. The Asia-Pacific region is of major economic and social importance, with 42% of the world's trade, 60% of the world's population, and thousands of islands, languages and cultures. We need to harmonise systems for measurement, standards and conformity assessment. Affordable food reference materials and proficiency testing studies are still required. More importantly for us is the key strategy of starting from the basics and keeping it simple. We acknowledge the wonderful contributions from the many professionals in the Asia-Pacific region to make these projects a success, especially the APFAN co-directors, Dr. Prapasi Puwastien from Thailand, Dr. Julia Cantasabrata from Indonesia, and Dr. Ada Aguinaldo from the Philippines. Finally, APFAN remains a voluntary organisation, and any sponsorship to help us achieve our aims would always be gratefully received. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that fantastic talk. Are there any questions at the moment? I've got one. So looking at all the different lab codes that it was provided with, you can see that, you know, there's some that are above and below, and I think, like, I noticed, like, code number 17 was below for two types of measurements. I mean, like, do you sort of go through all of those and sort of monitor which ones have trends and try to speak to those and help them?
Here you're talking about the results of the proficiency test.
That's right, yeah.
We have outliers on the lower end and outliers on the upper end.
Yeah.
In the proficiency testing report, there's usually a section where we look at the methods and we isolate those laboratories and try to find out why they've done that. In the majority of cases, it's a reporting error. In a lot of these PT studies, the results were written by hand and emailed back. And I've got another separate talk about how people... Transcription. Yeah, transcription errors. You know, there is a tendency for some laboratories to put a comma instead of a decimal point. And especially when you've got a result of 1,000, you don't know if it's 1,000 or 1.000. So there's an education in that thing as well. But in turn, if the variations that we see are actually due to the methods, then that's where I'm hoping that, you know, the revision of this ASEAN Foods Methods Manual, and if we can socialise it across the Asia Pacific, then that will, you know, fix those methodological problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the variations are in reporting errors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. I mean, I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and most of the problems there come with transcribing everything.
Yeah. So double check.
That's it.
Yeah. Sure. So the ISO standard, so lower the laboratories use, say, ICPIA for metals analysis. So some laboratories can't afford ICPs, of course, which is the Asia region. So it does allow that flexibility to use a different type of instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, for sure. And most of the laboratories do use either flame, in that area, either flame photometer or just AAS. So yeah, the number of ICPs that you could count on your hand. But I mean, they can use whatever instrumental technique they like. When we go through the methods manual, we'll be looking at a method that most laboratories use. But if they can use an ICP and demonstrate through reference materials and proficiency testing that it's providing the same result, then that's fine. Whatever technique they want to use.
How do you address the problem of what is the true answer, particularly with something like moisture? There's obviously water in it. If you are drying it at different temperatures, you will get different answers. So what's right?
Good question. From somebody from the National Measurements. Well, they're empirical results, aren't they? Which means the result is defined by the actual method. So if you really want to say that moisture is the water content, then you have to do a Carl Fisher titration to measure the H2O molecules, to get the true value. So moisture is really just lost at 100 degrees at a certain, over a certain period of time. And then depending on the food matrix, like honey, you can't dry at 100 degrees. You have to freeze dry it to try and get a moisture figure. So again, in the methods that we put up as Asia Pacific methods, we will have to specify the matrix, which matrix the method will apply to, which matrix it doesn't apply to. And for some matrices, maybe you could dry at 130 degrees. So we just have to make sure we specify which matrix. But yeah, with those empirical results or empirical methods, we have to be very careful in what we define.
Just on that, Stuart, obviously, for inorganic compounds, moisture is generally fairly well defined with a lot of organic materials, as you referred to there. You can actually get decomposition or denaturing of the product, volatile losses, which are not water.
Yes, that's right.
So, as you say, the methodology, I would expect that a lot of organics at 130 would be losing a lot more than just water.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd like to finish by thanking Stewart for his fantastic talk and his from the RACI.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.